Oh, we're in the present. I keep thinking we're in 1910, thinking orbit, that's a long way away.
We can
barely even fly right now.
Still a long way away.
But, since, the 1960s and stuff, we've been sitting atop gigantic exploding loads of balls of fire in an attempt to get into space. And no, it's okay, he hasn't heckled me yet. We've got a rocket scientist in the audience.
Ex-rocket scientist.
You see, I'm right!
My rockets will blow up.
So, I'm of doing things, not necessarily practical or safe, but more fun. So, there's a few ghosts around. I'm going to start off and tell you what I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about Skylon.
Oi!
Skylon's far too sensible. Skylon's just this terribly really good idea of taking these lovely little things, Sabre engines, which is an air-breathing rocket engine that at the front end is kind of like a jet engine, and it sucks in air so you don't need to have any oxygen with you while you're in air. It then uses some of that hydrogen to cool it, and mixes it in with some of the hydrogen that you've got on board, and shoves it out as rocket propellant out the back. Really, really good idea. And it's a single plane, space plane. It flies single stage to orbit. It's uncrewed, so no one will die when it all screws up. About 80 meters in length, and yeah, a really good idea.
Yay!
Kind of almost practical. Look, looks almost like a plane.
Looks like a black hole.
It's green, hydrogen fueled. No.
How are you producing your hydrogen?
Don't ask me questions.
I imagine it into being. It's pretty safe. I mean, what are you going to get if it goes wrong? A big explosion. No big deal. No cities leveled. And it's ultimately rather boring. I prefer something a little bit more exciting. So I've got three really cool ideas for you guys here. They're big. Actually, they're huge. Most of them. They're expensive, which is always good. If it costs a lot of money, it must be good. So say Apple. But ultimately cheap. If we did build these things, the cost per kilogram to orbit would be so low, we could send mother-in-laws there. Actually, I don't care about the cost. Shit, can we get a rocket going? Jez? No, we'll talk about this later. That's the Q&A session. I question, you answer. And these are astronomically dangerous. When we try these and they go wrong, they'll go phenomenally wrong. And I really don't think we can try them and not make mistakes. So this is the bit that I think is going to be fun. So here we go. I'm going to attempt, with the aid of one poor graphic, to explain space fountains. Right? You ever seen that kind of thing that can be done where on a fountain you can balance a little ball on top?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, instead of a column of water, you have a column of electromagnetically accelerated ball bearings or bits of iron ingots in a chain or something. And you jet them out of here at 10 kilometers a second, somewhere like escape velocity. Not that fast. Up through vacuum-sealed tubes so the air doesn't get in the way. And when you get to the top, you grab them with a space station with a big load of magnets and electromagnets, and then you bring them back down again, thus achieving lift in your space station. And what you're essentially making is an active structure. This could actually be a very large building with floors, each floor the weight of which would be partially supported by linear accelerators accelerating the downward flow further downwards. So this unlike a typical space tether elevator where you drop a line from a geosynchronous orbit down to the Earth, this is something that can be built upwards in stages, so eminently practical for low values of practical. So this kind of starts to get a few key little concepts in about active structures that require constant power, otherwise they'll fall down. That requires a bit of trust in the technology. You know, I mean, what we're talking about here is several nuclear reactors at the base. And probably 3 or 4 of these at least actually supporting the structure, just in case one of them goes down.
We use high pressure steam engines.
I'll come to that later. Yes, but not for this idea. So really this isn't the most practical of the ideas here, but I'm kind of trying to get you grounded in a few of the key concepts here of active structures using magnetic accelerators to get bits of metal up to speed. And we're about to get to my favorite idea out of the lot of these, which is launch loops, or Lofstrom loops, which are active structures, maglev cable transport systems. You know when you're in the garden playing with a hose, and you've got a jet of water, right, doing a nice parabolic arc? That's kind of what we're doing, but it's not a jet of water, it's a 4,000 kilometer long chain of iron ingots. And what it kind of does is something a bit like this. In fact, I prefer this diagram. This is lovely, right? Here we have a bit of the Earth. And here we have this system. I'll describe it. It's this thing over here, but just give me a second. And around here you have a big permanent magnet and your magnetic induction accelerators. And it goes up here. And at the point where this would actually do a big parabolic arc, you actually keep it tethered down to only 80 kilometers high. Stop it going out into, basically out into orbit. Because when you're still in the atmosphere, it'll burn up all the little micrometeorites and all the shit that will hit it and break it and cause damage. So what would happen is something that you basically magnetically couple to this thing, come along and you'd get about 3G of acceleration for the 2,000 miles, accelerating you up to orbital velocity, you flip off the end and fly up into a nice orbit. Hurrah! And everything will be cheap. The cable then continues back around the east deflector, comes back around the other way, and this is your cable loop, going like that. A few stabilization cables, hopefully, should stop this from wavering around too much. And a few nuclear power stations here will keep the whole thing ticking along nicely. What this is this thing over here. Where you see rotor, that is your big load of iron ingots joined end to end, or whatever it is that you're using as a cable. And that rotor there is only about 5 centimeters in size. That isn't a huge bit. 5 centimeters in diameter and 2,000 kilometers long is a bit more huge. It's surrounded by a sheath that's basically to keep the atmosphere out, and that sheath is prevented from hitting the rotor by a bunch of magnets. It's supported by magnets, and you have to have those actively moving away if they try and get close. Not necessarily the easiest way of doing things, and if it goes wrong, it goes terribly and horribly wrong. But that keeps your whole cable in a vacuum, shooting around at probably more than 7 kilometers a second, which is that's the whole thing going quite nicely. One of the things I love about this is it actually has use as not this at smaller scales. I could feasibly see us work up towards something like this by simply making an active bridge. You want to bridge a long distance. Instead of trying to build a gigantic structure, just build a parabola maybe 50 miles long instead of 200. Keep feeding it energy and that bridge will survive. The other thing, those store energy. If your nuclear power stations all, fell silent, this would actually keep going round for quite some time before it lost enough energy to come collapsing down. So, unless something catastrophic happens, it's actually not quite as dangerous as I would like. So that I think I've kind of covered that. And we can move on to the final one, which is where the steam will come in. And this is slingatrons, right? I'm from the northeast of England, and we fry our food there, right? We fry everything. And if you ever noticed, if you've got a frying pan, and you just stick a knob of butter in the frying pan, you do a tiny little motion, and it's whizzing round. Slings are brilliant, David Goliath, everything like that. It takes a very small motion of that frying pan to get that butter whizzing around, and that butter, of course, it's on a gas bearing. It's floating on the kind of evaporating, sizzling butter. Two key concepts in slingatrons. So this is kind of what one would look like. That's a person there, and it's really not that big. It's something like 300 meters in diameter. I can visualize that. I'm not really sure if I can visualize a 2,000 kilometer long cable that wide, self-supporting. And this might even play if you with a good lord, that works. This is kind of what it does. Some counterweights take this spiral tube. And you can see a potential drive system there. I'll see if I can stop this when it goes to the next thing. Oh, well, you can kind of vaguely see there. There's a spiral tube here. You would load a projectile in here. 3 revolutions later, it would come out the end at something approaching orbital velocity. The shell would look something like this, with on the outside where it rubs around the outside, there would be an ablative coating of something that would basically turn into gas as it slid around, and it would float on a gas bearing all the way around. The design they have for it involves several of them end to end, that once they came out the end would straighten, and that would zip off into orbit like some sort of magic missile. Oh, hang on, no, that's D&D, that's a totally different thing. This is physics, not magic. And the thing I love about this one is the materials required and the forces required. This could have been done back in 1910 with steam engines, but we weren't flinging things into space in 1910. We were just writing glorious books about it.
Very dangerous.
Danger is my middle name. Oh no, hang on. No, it's not. It's Colin. Sorry, I apologise. And actually, I do believe that's it for me. Apart from the questions and the heckling
And the clapping.